part of our continuing coverage of America at War. From CBS News headquarters in New York, here is Dan Rabbitt.
The headlines at this hour. Iraq is under attack from the land, sea, and air tonight. Tanks of the U.S. Army's 3rd Infantry Division rolled across the border. They're now in southern Iraq, meeting only light resistance. CBS News correspondent Scott Pelley tells us they are possibly 2 or 3 days drive from Baghdad. U.S. cruise missiles hit targets in Baghdad for a second day, blasting, among other things, the main presidential palace. Saddam Hussein, or possibly someone who looks like him, showed up on Iraqi TV again today. It's widely believed to be Saddam himself. U.S. intelligence officials, however, insist that Saddam was in the bunker hit a couple of nights ago in the opening airstrike of the war, but these unnamed officials say they don't know if he was killed or injured or escaped. They keep asking that question. On the ground, U.S. and British units crossed the border from Kuwait under cover of intense air and artillery barrages. Huge explosions lit the sky from the outskirts of the southern port city of Basra. Allied troops were not shelling that city itself, where sentiment is strong against Saddam Hussein, but they were shelling the Iraqi defenses around Basra. Behind the lines in Kuwait, Allied forces suffered their first casualties when a U.S. Marine helicopter crashed, killing 4 Americans and 12 British troops on board. Cause of the crash unknown at the moment. CBS News correspondent John Roberts was with the U.S.-led forces as they began their assault into Iraq. He joins us tonight live from inside Iraq with the U.S. Marines. John.
Dan, we are indeed inside southern Iraq, and we just started moving again after a brief pause. If you can believe it, out here in the middle of the barren Iraqi desert, there was a bit of a traffic jam. You have thousands of Marine vehicles all funneling into this area, and sometimes they tend to get in each other's way. I just also wanted to pass along that there was a little bit of concern not too long ago. One of the so-called Fox vehicles, these are the vehicles that go out looking for chemical and biological weapons, nuclear, biological, chemical monitoring vehicles, was monitoring, and repeat, only monitoring for possible nerve agent. Again, repeating that, only monitoring for a possible nerve agent. They reported back a short time ago that they had found nothing. Now, it is interesting to note, too, that with the Scud missiles that Saddam Hussein's forces fired at Kuwait City yesterday, and some of the other fire that has been shot across the border, none of it appears to be of a chemical or a biological nature at this point. We're just making our way through one of the many lanes here in the southern Iraqi desert, and if I could, I'd like to just kind of show you the type of conditions that the troops are dealing with here. Take a look at the front of our vehicle. Here's a camera at the front of our vehicle. The choking dust of this desert, the sand is a consistency almost like talcum powder, and you can see that it just completely obliterates your line of sight, and it makes driving very, very difficult. Kirk Spitzer, who is our able driver there, who you can see right in front of me, did a tremendous job getting us up to the border last night, and doing another great job today driving in this choking dust. At one point last night, we thought that we had fallen off of the main column, but Kirk managed to get us right back on. Producer Randall Joyce here as well in the front seat here, as we switch to our internal cameras. And if you want to take a look at what's happening at the back now, again, the dust is sort of choking this. We'll clean this off as the day goes on, but there's the rest of the column that's coming behind us. So back inside the vehicle now, Dan. We're just driving through the Iraqi desert. Destination known but not reportable at this point, but we'll stay with you as the 1st Marine Division makes its way into southern Iraq. Dan?
John, what kind of vehicle, if we can even call it that, are you bouncing around in there?
Well, Dan, we like to call it the secret squirrel, but it's a marvel of technology that's able to transmit live as we roar through the desert, at times up to 50 miles per hour. And we've got these cameras mounted inside and outside. It also has live capability when we're stationary, so that if we're in let's say a refueling stop or a water supply stop or something like that, we are able to go up and broadcast live as well. So we've got the capability to go through the desert and broadcast live as the troops push in, and then we can also go when we're standing still, stationary. Yeah.
John, I don't want to be flip about it, but if the Marines have any extra heavy-duty shock absorbers, let us recommend that you get some. But let's move on to the more substantive material here. I didn't have any idea until you showed us through the windshield.
Actually,
go ahead, John.
No, go ahead, Dan. I was just going to say that this road is actually pretty smooth compared to some of the ones that we've been on lately.
And John, I had no idea that the sand was this thick. When we talk about the fog of war, it's usually a metaphor. Here you have, in effect, sand fog. Let's set aside the question of whose idea it was to launch this kind of offensive in this kind of sand conditions deep into the sandstorm season. Let's set that aside for the moment. How much of an impediment, how much does this slow down the advance of the Marines you're with?
It doesn't really slow it down, Dan, when you're talking just about the sort of dust that's kicked up by a vehicle. It just means you really got to keep your head on a swivel and make sure that you keep an eye on the vehicle in front of you. Where it really tends to bog down operations is when you get those sandstorms that kick up. And they create a real choking dust that completely obscure visibility. Obviously, the GPS-guided bombs, the JDAMs as they're called, Joint Direct Attack Munitions, still function very well because they're working off of satellites. But anything where you need line of sight or laser guiding or anything like that is extremely affected by sandstorms. It can also slow down the movement of armored columns as well, and certainly infantry has a difficult time when the sand is blowing. This is really just being kicked up by the vehicles, but you can imagine we had a little bit of trouble last night. We thought we were inside Iraq when we were actually still on the Kuwaiti side of the border. It's because when you're wearing night vision goggles and you see that cloud of sand kick up in front of you, there's absolutely no light whatsoever to be amplified by the night vision goggles, and it's like being in the middle of a blizzard or being in the middle of a vanilla milkshake. You cannot see literally the front of the vehicle. Now looking off to our side here, let me pick up our remote camera here. If I could, we seem to see a line of vehicles off to the left there. It's a line of camels. Through the smoke in my aging eyes, it's difficult to tell what's what. But there is the ship of the desert out there to the side. Some of what we're seeing as we travel through the desert here. The one thing that we haven't encountered, and it's been kind of unusual, is there have been no opposing forces that have been sighted so far. Now, obviously, we have some lead elements of this battalion that are roaming far in front of us, who are making sure that all of the lanes are cleared. But so far, there's been absolutely no sight of any Iraqi forces. I have to say that there was heavy bombardment last night. They were just pounding these units. The 18th Division, the 51st Division, with artillery. Shells were falling at the rate of 1 a second at a 30-minute barrage. Then they take a 30-minute break to rearm, and then they'd be back at it again, a shell a second for another 30 minutes. We saw them from our pre-positioning point just south of the berm that marks the northernmost point of the Kuwaiti border. We saw them dropping bombs all night long. There's a hill to the north, just to the north of the Iraq-Kuwaiti border, and I think I'm good in saying this because this was supposed to be attacked last night. It's called Safwan Hill. It's an observation post. It's a listening post. And the U.S. military, changing again here to got our camera up and a helicopter up in the sky there, as you can see. But the U.S. military wanted to take away the Iraqi military's eyes. And so what they did was they dropped at least 20 JDAM bombs, these Joint Direct Attack Munitions with the GPS guide, and a bunch of napalm on the top of that hill. They said that the elevation of the hill was 441 feet when they started. It would be 421 feet when they finished. They plan to take 20 feet off of the top of that mountain. And the reason why they dropped the napalm was they said that they wanted to send up a signal flare so that the 51st and the 18th Iraqi divisions could see that from a long way off, know what they were up against, and the U.S. military's intention with that was to encourage them to lay down their weapons. They're trying as much as possible here to minimize Iraqi casualties, to minimize the possibility of American casualties by trying to convince these divisions to surrender. Now, there's a famous story that was rolling around the camp that we were at last week that one of the division generals called his Iraqi counterpart on his cell phone. He got the cell phone number of this Iraqi general, and he said, when the shooting starts, meet me on the border and surrender, or you will be annihilated. So this is part of the psychological operations, the psyops that the U.S. military is engaging in as well, Dan.
John, a small question. First of all, let me say, to see you live by video phone traveling along there with a camel, we don't know whether it's a camel caravan or couldn't tell whether it was just a herd of camels, if you will, off to the left as you travel along. This is further indication that this is the first information war. But John, about how fast you're traveling, how many miles per hour? Take a look down there at the speedometer. About what's your speed?
Oh, right now it's not very much. It's about 3 miles per hour. We've slowed down again, but I think we got up to about 40 miles an hour during a couple of those runs there. And these light armored vehicles that the second Light Armored Reconnaissance Battalion out of Camp Lejeune, North Carolina uses are capable of doing 50 or 60 miles an hour across rough and open terrain. So this battalion, as I mentioned before, is really the tip of the spear. It goes in. It's tasked with, in any engagement, going in deep and going in quickly, drawing the enemy out. Reporting back to the main battalion where the enemy is, maybe laying down some suppressing fire and engaging with some armored vehicles just to let that unit know that the Americans are on their way, and then the follow-on forces do the mopping up operation. So these guys, they have to be light, they have to be fast, they have to be tough, and after living with them for the past couple of weeks out in the Kuwaiti desert, I can tell you, Dan, that they are all three and more.
John Roberts is reporting live by video phone as the U.S. Marines highball toward Baghdad. In a companion move, the U.S. Army's 3rd Infantry Division is doing much the same thing. John, stick in here with us, if you will. One's reminded that Napoleon, in another age, another era of warfare, said, and I quote him, "The strength of an army, like the momentum in mechanics, is estimated by the weight multiplied by the velocity. A rapid march exerts a beneficial moral influence on the Army and increases its means of victory," meaning, in effect, that it helps morale. Now, my question to you, John Roberts, if you had a chance to talk to these Marines, is their morale up high, or are they still in sort of wound tight, given that they've only been inside Iraq for a few hours now?
Morale has been very high, Dan. As you know, as a former Marine, morale in the Marine Corps tends to be very high. They are used to living in austere environments, unlike some of their counterparts in other branches of the military. They're used to doing everything with nothing, and so for them, living in the desert hasn't really been the hardship that it might have been for some of the other forces. But the one thing that we ran into time and time again when we were talking with these Marines was this idea that nobody wants to be here, nobody wants to go to war, but they have a job to do, and they would like to get the job done as quickly as possible and go back home. The one thing that we hear all the time is, my main goal here, and let me just, if I could, switch to our remote camera here. The one thing that I hear them say all the time is, we just want to go home. We want to get this done, and we want to go home. But I have to say that after being with them, every time you talk to these Marines, you rarely hear a complaint, unless it's about the fact that it was taking so long. Let me switch back here. And unless you hear from them, it's the fact that it was taking so long for them to get about the business that they do engage in professionally, although they were all hoping as well that if diplomacy was possible to bring this to a resolution, they would support that as well.
John Roberts, we intend to pick you up along the way. I see the dust seems to be thinning out at least a little bit, and however many camels there were off to your left as you rode along there, they seem to be going their own pace in the opposite direction.
Oh. Dan, actually, if we can just get our remote camera up, Randall, there's a shot. Looks like an Iraqi tank out there. And sorry if there's a little bit jittery here, Dan, as we just get this in. That's what appears to be, to my foggy eyes, to be an Iraqi T-72 tank. And that's sitting all by itself out there in the desert. It seems to be in a fighting position. And difficult to say if that tank was hit last night, or if it was abandoned, or what it's doing out there in the desert. But as far as I know, the Marines have not been in Iraq long enough to themselves have dug in some fighting positions. So it's very possible that that is. Let me switch to this. I'm sorry for the shaky camera work here. And if Reynolds is ready, we'll go back to it. That would appear to be an Iraqi tank out there, Dan. Disposition unknown at this point.
John, is it possible it was a tank left over from 1991, hit dead in the turret and just left out there?
You know, Dan, I've never been to this part of the world before, so it's quite possible that that's been there for 12 years, or it's quite possible that it's only been there overnight. Difficult to say.
John Roberts reporting live video phone with U.S. Marines as they pierce deeper into southern Iraq. I hope we can get some pictures up now of the U.S. Army's 3rd Infantry Division, which is somewhat to the, as best we can figure it out, somewhat to the west of the Marines. General Kernan, do you have any information on that, and would it be a security thing to say if we knew?
Well, right now we assume that they are to the west. Let me just add something to what John was pointing out there. The description of the weather conditions, the dust, and what we were able to see. If you can imagine what that's like for the helicopter pilots. This is probably the most treacherous, most dangerous conditions in which we can find ourselves flying.
You're talking now over these pictures taken earlier. These are the Army 3rd Infantry Division equipment, their tanks, their river crossing equipment, and so forth. Go ahead, General.
Yeah, I was just trying to add on to what John was talking about in regard to the dust conditions and the impact that could have on flying conditions. We earlier had that crash. The point being that brownout conditions for both takeoff and landing obscures the pilot's vision, and when you have night vision goggles, it's even more difficult. So this is probably some of the most dangerous conditions we're going to find ourselves both driving and flying, but flying in particular. And what you're seeing right now, of course, this is probably the 3rd Infantry Division. They do have bridging material. If they have to use it, it's there. They bring it up very rapidly, bridge any obstacles, and move rapidly across it. But what they'll try to use is the existing crossing sites, the bridges and so forth, if they still exist and they don't have to secure them from the enemy, or even if they do have to secure them from the enemy, they can move much more quickly across those existing bridges rather than bringing up bridging material.
That is, the bridges don't get blown, of course.
That's correct.
Thank you, General. We also want to mention that there have been sporadically over the last few days these reports of at least some members of 2 Iraqi People's Army divisions willing to surrender to coalition forces, allied forces, and again tonight there's some reports that at least some of those units have now surrendered to allied forces. And while it's believed that that's true, we have not absolutely, completely, solidly confirmed that, and therefore we mention it to you that it's widely expected, if they haven't done so already, that they will do so, and it may turn out to be true that they've already done so. We simply can't report it as a fact as yet because we don't know it to be a fact. CBS News 60 Minutes 2 correspondent Scott Pelley is on the front lines along the Iraq-Kuwaiti border, and Pelley joins us tonight live from near Basra, where the British are moving on that port city, but Scott's my understanding they have not, at least not yet, actually taken it.
Not taken it yet, Dan, but certainly the British and combined American forces very, very soon will be in a position to be able to do so if they want to. There was a tremendous artillery barrage laid down here last night, lasted all night long as they softened up the Iraqi defenses all around Basra, the 2nd largest city in Iraq, about 1.5 million people. And we are still hearing some artillery being fired this morning, but at this point it has slackened greatly. It is clear that the battle for these approaches to Basra's right behind me, the battle for these approaches to Basra has concluded, and the American and British forces are moving at will through this area. Just a few minutes ago, we encountered 3 U.S. Marine helicopters. They are Cobra attack helicopters, and they were loaded for bear, Dan. They were loaded with Hellfire missiles, full racks, all 3 of them. And one of the things I found interesting about them was they were patrolling up and down this border area, and they didn't seem to have any targets. Their missile racks were all completely full, and they seem to have run out of targets of opportunity to shoot with those Hellfire missiles, which are generally used against armor. So things in this part of the border area are quickly becoming pacified. The next big event in this sector will be the approach to Basra and the taking of that city. Dan?
Scott, what do you hear about that? You say the next big thing is when the unit is understood to be there's a dropout there, that now we look forward to what happens forward, if that's a proper phrase, to what happens in Baghdad itself. Now, we talked to David Chater earlier. He is convinced that some of the very best Republican Guard units, along with others, are already in Baghdad, in private homes, perhaps in mosques and other places, that they're dispersed inside Baghdad.
Yes, Baghdad is going to be difficult, but one of the things that the Army and the Marine Corps is hoping about Basra, where we are here, is that Basra will be a welcoming city. And it is more likely to occur here than just about any place else in Iraq. Basra, as you know, is a city that is primarily Shiite Muslim. Saddam and his inner circle are Sunni Muslim. Saddam has persecuted the people of the Basra area for years, and in fact, in 1991, after the Gulf War there was an insurrection against Saddam here. So these people, of all the people of Iraq, the people right here in the Euphrates River Valley down around Basra are the people most likely to welcome the coalition forces. What the U.S. Army would like to see here is a welcoming into the city without a gunfight, and then to be able to put that image on television all around the world and show the world that the Iraqi people are welcoming U.S. forces. It is an important psychological edge that they hope to achieve in Basra. Once they have Basra, it is a fairly easy drive up the road, about 200 miles to Baghdad itself. But Dan, as you said, the Republican Guard and the Special Republican Guard, Saddam's most loyal, best equipped, best trained troops, have been drawn into a circle around Baghdad, have been drawn into specific neighborhoods inside Baghdad that they feel that they can defend. And it is the hope of the Pentagon that they will be able to get those forces to surrender, because digging them out, block by block, house by house, is something that no one in the military is looking forward to.
Well, Scott, I know that the U.S. Marines have a pretty incredible little piece of equipment, a backpack-sized robot, which is designed specifically, among other things, to aid in house-by-house, block-by-block fighting. It even, as my understanding, has the ability to sort of look around corners in a way. Did you see the Marines carrying any of those backpack robots?
Well, we haven't seen any of that equipment per se, but you're quite right, Dan. They have a lot of specialized technology that they hope would give them an edge in urban combat. They have fiber optic systems that literally allow them to see around corners. They have an eyepiece that comes out of a helmet so they can have a little television monitor there, see around corners, see inside buildings before they have to enter them. And frankly, one of the things that they've been working on, the U.S. Army and the Marine Corps here over the last 4 months, is urban warfare training. One unit we visited in Kuwait 3 or 4 weeks ago had literally built a little town out of trailers, and every day they were going in there with live ammo in their weapons and training, sort of like a SWAT team, really, more than anything else, working on those techniques to be able to clear rooms and clear buildings as safely as possible.
Scott Pelley, 60 Minutes 2 correspondent, CBS News correspondent, who was in the thick of things earlier in the day, reporting live from along the Kuwait-Iraqi border. Thanks, Scott. I'm going to turn again to General Buck Kernan. Let's pause for a moment. The storyline of the hour is the U.S. Army's 3rd Infantry Division, with their tanks, with their river crossing equipment, with their fuel supplies, are rolling toward the Euphrates River. The U.S. Marines are rolling somewhat to the east of them. The British ground forces are moving toward Basra. They have not yet taken Basra. That's kind of the storyline of the hour. The storyline of the day is that after a second raid on Baghdad with specific targets, not a big air and light show, if you will, specific targets, after that, U.S. ground forces moved into Iraq, but Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld says there could be a lot worse to come if the Iraqi army doesn't cave and surrender. Now, General, put a frame around all that for us.
I think what you may be seeing, Dan, is us exercising some operational patience here. We're not experiencing any resistance. we're maintaining all-around security as we move forward toward those objectives, both Basra and eventually Baghdad. As long as we don't experience any contact, we're going to be very judicious in employing our combat power, because we don't want to unnecessarily kill people. We don't want to damage property. If we can come in and basically cordon off Baghdad, be very selective in the engagement of whatever forces are necessary after we've isolated Saddam Hussein and his chain of command, tighten a noose around him, that would be the most effective way to go about doing this, speaking very generally now.
General, thanks. You mentioned the speculation about Saddam Hussein, whether he's still alive, whether he's still in control. Now, David Chater, speaking to us live a short while ago from Baghdad, says both he and all Iraqis he has been able to talk to in Baghdad are, one, absolutely convinced that Saddam Hussein is still alive. They believe that the person who has appeared on television twice in the last 24 to 36 hours was indeed Saddam Hussein. Now, with that as background, the report from Baghdad itself, speculation continues to swirl around the question of what has happened to Saddam Hussein. A great deal of this speculation is fed by unnamed intelligence and military sources in Washington and by Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld himself in his briefing today. Now, in the last few hours, intelligence officials have been quoted by the Washington Post as insisting that they believe Saddam Hussein was in the compound that was struck by U.S. missiles in the first hour of the war. They insist they think he was there. They insist they think the compound was hit very hard. CBS News correspondent Russ Mitchell has more about all this. Russ?
Dan, these unnamed sources from the Washington Post also say there are indications that medical attention was needed for Saddam Hussein. They say they're basing this on what they call the fact that medical attention was urgently summoned on his behalf. Again, this from unnamed sources at the Washington Post. But as you pointed out, officials are still not sure if Saddam Hussein is alive or dead. This morning there was a cabinet meeting in Iraq where Saddam Hussein, or someone who looked like Saddam Hussein, held court. Officials aren't sure if that was him or not, nor are they positive that Saddam Hussein was the person speaking to the Iraqi people on Wednesday after the attacks. Now, according to the Washington Post, Saddam Hussein may have been with one or two of his very powerful sons when the bomb started hitting on Wednesday. And let me tell you a little bit about his sons. The eldest is Uday. He is 39 years old. He is described by Iraqis as greedy, flashy, and corrupt. He owns newspapers and a television station. He also runs the Baghdad Olympic Committee. There are some reports in Iraq that he has been known to torture and kill members of the Iraqi soccer team if they did not perform to his liking. The other son is Qusay. He is 37 years old. He is described as cool, has his father's trust, and is the heir apparent, according to sources. But also he is known as ruthless. Saddam Hussein's favorite movie, according to those in Iraq who know him, is The Godfather. And Newsweek magazine a while back did a story on the family and pointed out if Saddam Hussein is the Don Corleone character in The Godfather, well, his son Uday would be Sonny, the reckless, hot-headed son, and Qusay would be Michael, the cool but ultimately more dangerous son. But Dan, we've pointed out, we've heard from folks in Iraq who say either way, both of these guys in some circles have been known to make their father look like a choir boy.
Russ Mitchell, I want to come back to you on this subject. Right now, let's go live to Aaron Moriarty, who's in Kuwait City, where air raid sirens went off a minute ago. You wouldn't recognize Aaron because of necessity. She put on her gas mask. Aaron, I ask you to get the microphone as close as you can to your mouth. Tell us what's happening.
Well, that was the 8th time that there was an air raid siren that sounded, and I do have to follow instructions, so I have it on until we hear it all clear. It's been this way, Dan, since yesterday, and I think it's caught everyone here by surprise.
There have been at least 3 confirmed missiles lobbed of some description lobbed into Kuwait today. Some reports earlier said 8, some said 6, but we feel comfortable saying 3 confirmed. 2 of them were reportedly shot down by Patriot missiles. Another sort of broke apart and fell near some Marines. No casualties anywhere. What is the effect of the almost continuous alerts, Aaron, on morale there in Kuwait City?
Well, Dan, I have to be honest. While there were no injuries or reports of damage, what has been shattered is this sense of security. I talked to so many people this last week. Most of the Kuwaitis here didn't even have gas masks with them. Now there's a total change. Last night we were outside right on the street. No one was on the street except right in front of the Egyptian Air offices. And people were just begging for airline tickets, a seat anywhere out. Last night for a short time the airport was closed. Today the airport is open, but most of the flights are still either canceled or delayed. So it's very difficult for a lot of people here who were so relaxed just a day or so ago.
And Aaron, the city, Kuwait City, looks and sounds quiet. I hear very little background noise. Are people off the streets, staying in their homes, or is there some sense of business as usual?
Well, many of the stores are closed. Most people are off the streets. Although one man here in Kuwait told me it's just the women who are nervous, not the men. But we noticed last night, most of the time the stores are open until 10 o'clock at night. Nearly all of them were closed. Very few people on the street. The police were out, particularly in front of like the airline offices, because they didn't want any kind of riot. It actually surprised me because people have been so calm up until now.
Aaron Moriarty reporting live from Kuwait City where there's been another missile air raid alert, but so far no sign of any strike. In the war with Iraq, you can see and feel the concern for the U.S. forces deployed over there among the families they left behind in places such as Fort Campbell, Kentucky. CBS's Bob McNamara is there.
War's beginning brought a rush of fear to this Army town.
We all realize it's real and that we have no control over what goes on.
23, 57.
While life is usually by the numbers and by the book, war is a wild card.
No sleep. A lot of explaining to the kids to do. That Daddy's not going to come home as soon as maybe we thought he would.
Cheryl Snap keeps her husband Frank close.
Well, I have his dog tags that he gave me. He had these made for me to keep with me and close. It's a reminder.
With 19,000 to Fort Campbell's airborne troops in the war zone, reservists are arriving here for processing, like the medical attention necessary for them to join the fighting. Rick Mullins is one of 7 Tennessee reservists headed for the war zone with their sons. He promised his wife their son Jeff would come home, even if it meant giving his own life.
I'll guarantee you, no question, in my mind, he'll come home before I will if I have to. If I got anything to say about it.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Dozens of soldiers were married by Judge Steve Tribble just before they left for the Gulf.
It was a hectic day. It was wild.
His fear is some of those names could appear on casualty lists.
Absolutely. And I mean, there may be several of them that don't come back.
This was one of his patches, and I had kept it with me all this time.
Seamstress Marilyn Fry's brother was killed in the Gulf War. Now she works 12 hours a day, sewing airborne patches to uniforms for another desert conflict.
We never got to say goodbye, but, you know, you get over it. I mean, you actually never get over it, but you deal with it.
Marilyn Fry has sewn thousands of these flags on uniforms lately. And like many here tonight, she is hoping and praying that the men and women who wear them will come back to Fort Campbell alive.
Bob McNamara in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Now, many other Americans are following through with their promise to protest the war, which for various reasons they say they feel deeply about. Several thousand anti-war activists turned out to demonstrate across the United States today. It's impossible to get even a fairly accurate estimate, but we can only say many thousands. About 2,000 were arrested. In Chicago, police said about 10,000 protesters, all told, tried during the day to block traffic on the city's main streets. At least 200 were arrested in Chicago. Thousands more demonstrated in San Francisco, disrupting traffic during rush hours. John Blackstone was there in San Francisco.
In San Francisco, demonstrators chose their targets with precision. One was the corporate headquarters of the construction giant Bechtel Incorporated.
We're bringing it home without problem, but we're bringing it home.
Bechtel is one of those believed to be bidding to rebuild Iraq after the war.
There are thousands and thousands of people coming out to say no to U.S. empire.
Protesters moved through San Francisco's financial district, stopping traffic at major intersections.
We think that it's wrong for there to be business as usual while the war's going on.
The protesters left some usually busy streets in the heart of the city empty. On others, there was gridlock. Did you intend to be part of this morning?
No, we got stuck.
I have rights too. They have rights to protest the war. I have rights to go to work.
Opinion polls show that in California, support for the war is dramatically below levels in the rest of the country. Here in San Francisco, anti-war demonstrations have brought tens of thousands into the streets. It doesn't seem to have had an impact.
That's true, and that's why it's time to escalate now.
Even though we personally, as this little group, can't stop the war, as all of this going downtown is powerful. That's how I feel.
San Francisco police made more than 1,000 arrests as they tried to keep the streets open. Police say it's believed to be the largest number of arrests ever made in a single day here.
I don't support killing for oil, and I definitely don't support our President Bush, but I do support peacemakers like this.
Fight back! Fight back!
In New York, protesters held umbrellas as well as placards. In Philadelphia, demonstrators blocking the entrance to the federal building were given a deadline.
3 minutes to move!
About 100 were arrested. There were other protests nationally, from Providence, Rhode Island to Seattle, Washington. Here in San Francisco, demonstrators promise more civil disobedience. Police expect more arrests. John Blackstone, CBS News, San Francisco.
And now we go from San Francisco to the desert in southern Iraq, where John Roberts is with elements of the U.S. Marine 1st Division, where they have literally their pedal to the metal, heading hopefully for the Mesopotamia Valley. And John, is it fair or unfair to say the Marines, whether they have any realistic chance of doing it or not, they would love to beat the Army to the outskirts of Baghdad?
Well, you know, Dan, the Marines always like to be first, and if they could be the first ones to the gates of Baghdad, I'm sure that they would. A little orientation for where we are right now as we just kind of slow down again in the cloud of dust. If you take a look at the front, these are the conditions that we're driving in. To the side, it looks pretty good, but to the front, it often obscures our vision almost totally. We appear to be rolling through a Persian Gulf War I, a Gulf War I battlefield. There's lots of old armament here that's blown into numerous pieces. There are lots of fighting holes in which soldiers would have dug fighting positions in. Don't know which battlefield this is, nor should we probably say which one it is either, because for reasons of operational security, we're being deliberately vague about where we are in the overall scheme of things. But it's safe to say that this is a battlefield left over from 1991. Again, and I stressed this the last time that you and I chatted, Dan, we have so far seen no Iraqi armor, no Iraqi soldiers, no Iraqi vehicles, nothing to suggest that there's anyone out here other than the U.S. Marines, which could be an indication that we're going around the Iraqi positions, or it could also be an indication that the Iraqi divisions have chosen not to fight, either decided to stay in their barracks, or perhaps are engaging in some sort of negotiation to capitulate, or perhaps they're just rounded up in another area and they're far from where we are. Difficult to say, Dan, but I know that the strategy of the U.S. military is to get some of these softer units, the regular Army units, and get them to capitulate in order to minimize the number of casualties, in order to minimize the difficulty in traversing this difficult terrain as they work their way up to Baghdad. Now, going back to what you were initially asked, there have been schedules thrown around of maybe the Army and Marines could be outside of the gates of Baghdad in 3, perhaps 4 days. Now, as one of the commanding colonels, Joe Dowdy, said yesterday, you know, anytime that we go into enemy territory, the enemy has a vote in what happens. He says, and definitely the Iraqis have a vote in what happens. Though the Marines have met little resistance so far, they know that, and this is well documented as well, this is not breaching operational security at all, they know that some of the tougher units of the Republican Guard and the Special Republican Guard, like the Baghdad unit, the Al-Qaeda unit, they are waiting on the roads further north. Those units have been drawn back to protect Baghdad and the road to Baghdad. So while they may have some pretty easy going of it now, with the exception of the choking dust, they know that the road ahead could get much harder in the very near future.
John Roberts, want to remind folks that this is coming live through video phone. We didn't have this kind of technology for capability for television at the time of the last Gulf War. It's a small thing, but gives further proof how deep we've gone into information warfare, just one of those small things. Now, John Roberts, for those of you perhaps are just joining us or you need reminding, here's what the situation is. That the British ground forces have moved over toward Basra. In fact, let's go to a different map here. Moved over toward Basra on the southern tip of Iraq, the major port city, the only real big port that the Iraqis have opening into the Persian Gulf. And the British forces have concentrated more or less in this direction. They haven't taken Basra yet, although that is expected. The Marines, somewhere roughly in this area, this is where John Roberts is traveling with the Marines, and these are rough, and there's no security concern here because it is so rough. And the 3rd Infantry Division, those pictures of the tanks and their big equipment and their fuel trucks moving that we showed you earlier are roughly here. And the object is to, first of all, hook up with any forces of the Iraqi army that want to surrender. Also to secure the oil fields. Keep in mind that one of the main purposes of the mission, first purpose to decapitate Saddam Hussein, kill him and his sons if possible, keep him from being connected with his command and control. If you can't kill him, try to cut him off from his people. Second on the list of mission goals was to keep him from setting up fire to the oil fields. Now on this map, this Ramallah oil field is roughly in, this area of Basra. This is not exact. Now while some oil wells were reported to be burning here today, Defense Secretary Rumsfeld said some wells were, the field, so far as you know, has not been set afire. And so one of the roles of the Marines and or the Army, or we put that in reverse, you will, to secure that the oil field there. But in the main, what the Marines and where John Roberts is traveling along and the U.S. Army 3rd Division, what they want to do is get into this Mesopotamia Valley between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers, and then hightail it on up to at least the outskirts of Baghdad. And General Kernan, it'd be my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that a prudent commander might at least pause on the outskirts of Baghdad to assess how difficult it's going to be to take the city center itself.
Sure, absolutely, Dan. I mean, they're going to be continually doing a threat assessment. What is it they encounter? What kind of capabilities does the enemy have? How can they offset that? So yes, they will be doing that, and that'll be a very deliberate process.
And what will all these tanks that we see with the Army's 3rd Infantry Division, and for that matter the tanks the Marines have, do when they get to the gates of Baghdad?
Well, it basically allows us to cordon it off, to seal it, if you'd like. Seal Baghdad from any outside interference, and be able to start concentrating your efforts very selectively on those forces that are protecting Saddam Hussein, and if you can isolate him, go in specifically after him. I might just add one other thing, because I think it's important to point out, in addition to the objectives that you pointed out, the other one that is very important is making sure that we secure any weapon of mass destruction weapons that may be out there, and the delivery means.
That and making sure that Israel is not drawn into the war, that's one of the principal goals, and to get whatever combat we can get it done quickly, and to try to reopen schools, get hospitals operating, come in with what's generally called humanitarian aid to underscore to the Iraqi people that this is not an army of invasion. It's not an army of, it is an army of invasion. It's not an army of occupation. It's an army of liberation.
That's absolutely correct. What we want to gain their trust and confidence very quickly, that this is about improving their way of life, giving them their freedom, giving them control of their country. That's a very good point.
Thanks, General. And Russ Mitchell, I want to come back to you again about, partly because the Washington Post has run pretty hard with this story of unnamed intelligence agents following on to the tone set by Defense Secretary Rumsfeld earlier in the day that, well, Saddam Hussein may have indeed been hit in that bunker in the first night of raids on Baghdad. The intelligence agents saying we feel certain he was in there, we feel certain we hit the thing hard, so they keep raising questions. Two things occurred to me. One, Russ, what's the latest information on what we know, whether these broadcasts, the first one with Saddam Hussein right after the raid, and then the one that was put out today, whether these were live broadcasts or taped? Because if they were taped, it raises the possibility, italicize the word, that these were pre-taped, if you will, canned, to be played at the appropriate moment by Saddam Hussein.
Officially, that's still up in the air. Folks in the State Department say they still don't know if that first address by Saddam Hussein after the attacks was on tape or not. So officially from Washington, the word is they're not sure. I spoke with General Kennan yesterday on doing a story on finding Saddam, and he was pointing out, as Jim Stewart did as well in his piece, that Saddam apparently has at least 4 body doubles roaming around. So if you find someone who is dead and it looks like Saddam Hussein, and speaking with the general, he pointed out something really interesting. You'd almost have to get DNA from a family member to determine actually if it was in fact Saddam Hussein. So Dan, that remains the big question tonight. Was this Saddam Hussein at this cabinet meeting on Thursday, and was it Saddam Hussein addressing the Iraqi people on Wednesday? And once again, officially, the U.S. government does not know if that first address was on tape, if it was taped before the attacks, or if that was taped before the attacks as well. It's something that I'm sure will shake out, and hopefully in the next couple days.
Well, Russ, I want to raise this gently but directly, that since Washington is continuing to raise the question of whether the man who appeared in these 2 television appearances could conceivably be a double of Saddam Hussein, one would have to at least raise the possibility that however intelligence thought they saw Saddam Hussein in this bunker that was hit, you have to also raise the question that that could have been a double, and the intelligence could be based on a double. If you're going to raise it one way about the television appearance, it seems fair to at least raise the question, well, maybe the intelligence was based on seeing a double, and that Saddam Hussein was somewhere else when U.S. intelligence believed that they were hitting him with the bunker buster.
That's a very good point, and General Kennan, I hope you don't mind if I quote you again from yesterday. You pointed out that Saddam Hussein is a wily fellow, I believe was the phrase that you used. He has gotten away for 12 years plus and has been able to elude authorities, so he's very adept at doing this. So Dan, you raise a very good point there. It's certainly possible.
Well, we've said it before, and let's say it again, that anybody who's been in Saddam's presence for any length of time at all, and anybody who knows anything about his history knows that he is the ultimate survivor, that it's deep in his id, it's what it's about. He was raised to believe, and it does believe so deeply and passionately, that if he just survives, he triumphs. He survives, he wins. And so he's constantly thinking of survival. To speak personally, I came away from 2 interviews, one in 1990, just after he invaded Kuwait, and one fairly recently, convinced that utmost in Saddam Hussein's mind are 2 things. One, survival, and secondly, he dreams, he dreams of leading a victorious Arab army through the streets of Jerusalem and making of himself a modern-day Saladin. Now, one of this past day's important war developments took place in Turkey's parliament. After saying no to every U.S. request for support and including a lot of money offered, the Turks finally agreed to at least let U.S. warplanes cross Turkish airspace to reach Iraq. CBS's Alan Pizzi is in Kurdish-controlled northern Iraq, and he reports how that affects U.S. war plans.
Iraqi troops manning the front lines of northern Iraq seemed unconcerned about this morning's airstrike in Baghdad. They strolled openly within sight of Kurdish guerrillas. Expectations are that these Iraqi troops will surrender once the real hostilities begin. But on the main road leading from Kurdish-controlled areas to Kirkuk, they were seen laying landmines. Kurdish villages along the front lines are all but deserted. Most civilians have fled to the mountains, fearful that Saddam Hussein's forces could fire chemical weapons at them, as they did on villages near here in 1988. Temporary displacement is bearable, they say, if it means the end of Saddam.
For us, easier to welcome the war, especially when we are confident that the war would yield the disappearance of the tyranny and dictatorship in our countries.
But the northern front won't be anything like the push-up from Kuwait. The plan had been for a 62,000-strong armored force to lead the attack, but the Turkish parliament refused to allow U.S. troops and armor to use Turkey as a base. Today's vote to allow use of their airspace means the Americans can fly an airborne unit to at least 3 airfields in Kurdish-controlled northern Iraq, which would put them within striking distance of the oil-producing areas and Saddam's hometown of Tikrit. Kirkuk and its oil fields lie just beyond the ridge behind me, defended by regular Iraqi army units and at least an element of the Republican Guard. And that could prove a problem for U.S. troops who will have to move against them without the benefit of heavy armor. They will, however, have fierce allies eager to carry the fight to the Iraqis. The Kurds have agreed to put their forces under U.S. command, and they have promised not to make a mad dash for Kirkuk and risk upsetting the battle plan. Alan Pizzi, CBS News, Northern Iraq.
Now let's put some perspective on that Alan Pizzi report before we go to some extraordinary recent satellite pictures. This is an overall of the Middle East, and the advantage of what the Turks finally allowed the U.S. to do is that aircraft from these aircraft carriers in the Mediterranean can now fly up here, get refueled over Turkey, and increase considerably their time over targets in Iraq, whereas previously they had to do a big loop down here and then come up this way. Now the Turks have not, at least not yet, said they will allow ground troops in Turkey. And earlier this evening, CBS News' David Martin reported that some airborne unit, some U.S. airborne unit, had come in to this general area. This is the general area of the Kurds, a very general area there. Now we have no other information on this. There's been absolutely nothing else said about it. David Martin made it clear that this airborne unit, whatever it was and however large it was there, one, to secure at least one airfield and perhaps more, and two, to keep the Kurds, who are a combination of Sunni and Shiite Muslims, would have a different ethnic mix than the Sunni Muslims who are centered here and the Shiites down here, but to keep the Kurds and the other Iraqis from fighting, and also to keep, if they can, the Turks from moving into this area. It's a very complicated situation up there, and so we may learn more as the hours go by of what airborne unit is up in that area where you just heard that report from Alan Pizzi. And if you were asking yourself why Pizzi was dressed so warmly, including with a watch cap, you say, well, we had all this stuff down in the desert. Keep in mind, he's up north where there is a mountainous region there, that these mountains, which loop over into Iran, this mountain range eventually runs into the Hindu Kush and into the Himalayas as you go on here. This is fairly mountainous and it's fairly cool up there, and that's the reason that Pizzi was dressed that way. Now we have this extraordinary recent satellite photograph that shows how the Iraqis have begun to prepare defenses in the northern part of the country, roughly where Alan Pizzi just reported from. These pictures are taken from 200 miles up in space. Let me pause and let you absorb that. And they show the oil-rich region in the Kurdish part of northern Iraq. The pictures confirm reports from refugees in the last few days that Saddam Hussein's forces have indeed been beefing up defenses around the oil-rich city of Kirkuk. We zoom down now. We can see the major west-east highway leading to Kirkuk, and if you look carefully to the right of the highway, you can see thin, dark areas. See them there? Which are trenches filled with oil right along the side of the road. Now, our estimate is they're about 60 feet long and 6 feet wide, these trenches. See them in the black areas just to the right of the road. The Iraqis believe that by setting those trenches on fire, they can at least screen some of their infantry and tanks from attack and might be able to confuse even the sophisticated U.S. missile systems, though American military officials tell us that that is highly unlikely. So with those satellite pictures in mind, let's talk to General Buck Hernan about the oil fields. This isn't the first time the Iraqis have filled trenches like that with oil. They did pretty much the same thing and set them on fire in the 1991 first Gulf War.
That's correct, Dan. In addition to that, of course, they set off they started the oil fields on fire themselves. It's an environmental condition, much like what we saw already with the dust conditions. It is something we're going to have to deal with. It does obscure the battlefield somewhat, but it does not defeat by any means our precision munitions. These are now global positioning satellite directed munitions, unlike before where we had to laze them and they did obscure the laze. These munitions now are very precise, using satellite information to go right onto the target.
Let me raise a point. You say that setting these oil trenches on fire would be pretty much a non-factor. Is that too strong?
Well, it's not a non-factor. It obviously, much like what we saw when we were talking with John Roberts a few minutes ago, dust can slow your rate of advance. It can keep you from seeing your other forces on the battlefield. It does have a certain degrading effect, and the smoke from the fires would have the same thing. But we have sensors, night vision systems, and infrared systems that allow us to penetrate that.
Question. The oil won't do it, but the sand, the kind of sandstorm we see down in the bottom part of Iraq that we saw earlier, to the outside, unpracticed, unknowledgeable, non-military mind, so much of our armaments depend on lenses. They depend on optics for their targeting. Is it or is it not true that the sand, in addition to fouling up, gumming up such equipment as helicopters, could put small pits on some of those optics, whether you're talking about ground weaponry or aerial weaponry, and possibly throw them off just a little and therefore not hit their proper targets? Possibly, but I mean, this sand has an impact on just about everything, in particular things like helicopter blades. It has an erosion effect. Anybody who's driven down a country road behind another vehicle has experienced that. Well, magnify that 10, 20-fold, because this is like fine talcum powder. It's everywhere. It gets into everything. Thank you, General. Quickly, we're going to go to Jim Axelrod. Jim Axelrod was among the first to cross into Iraq with the 3rd Infantry Division of the U.S. Army. And Axelrod has been with him, and here's his report.
This is Jim Axelrod reporting from several miles inside Iraq. We are with the lead security elements of the 3rd Infantry Division. The main body of the 3rd Infantry Division is now crossing into Iraq. Those are the main Army ground force troops. They are now crossing into Iraq. We can confirm it. It is just about 6 o'clock in the morning Iraq time. We have been here for several hours. We came across with a security force that is paving the way, if you will, for the 3rd Infantry Division to come across, securing the roads, sweeping them, proofing them for mines, that sort of thing. When we came across at the border, just before midnight, last night, local time, there was a huge construction project going on, the kind of thing, the kind of road crew you might see on a summer Sunday on the way to the beach, the kind of crew that takes an hour's drive and turns it into an all-day affair. They were poised at the border, constructing, if you will, a road, or a wide expanse of road for the 3rd Infantry Division, some 10,000 vehicles to make the trip. Once in, we have some tape that we want to show you. We saw almost immediately an Iraqi observation post, which an American soldier says was hit by a round from a tank, and 4 Iraqis were killed. As we drove by, we saw the observation post on fire. We saw several carcasses, if you will, of T-55 tanks. Those are obviously left over from Desert Storm some 12 years ago on the side of the road. Several American soldiers were also engaged in what looked like with a vehicle. Some Iraqis, we have some pictures of that as well. These are the kinds of images we saw on the drive in. Also, an oil field seemed to be secured as well. Once in this area, we can't be more specific about exactly where we are, but once here, we had a chance to talk to several American soldiers, and this is what the conversations sounded like. What's the thing that is most sort of clear in your mind about the actual drive across?
This isn't just another training exercise, this is a real thing.
I was a little nervous at first, but then I know America will take over. I'll talk, you know.
You were a little nervous?
Yes.
How's that?
Talking about being nervous? Oh man, I was scared a little, man, because they got the chemical weapons and things. That's the only thing I'm really scared of.
Was it any different when it was for real than the dozens, if not hundreds of times you've done this during training?
Oh yeah, the adrenaline was pumping. There's a lot more exciting. It's just an altogether new experience.
So again, we've now been here for several hours, again with this main security force that is making the area, the roads, safe and secure for passage by the 3rd Infantry Division, which will occur throughout the course of the day as the American ground troops move from northern Kuwait into southern Iraq and begin to make their push northward. Jim Axelrod, CBS News, Iraq.
And the 3rd Infantry Division, its lead elements are now reported to be somewhere between 90 and 100 miles deep into Iraq. Now, if you keep in mind that it's roughly about 300 miles, check me if I'm wrong here, General, about 300 miles to Baghdad, that they're already about 1/3 of the way to Baghdad. That's not to suggest that they can necessarily keep up this pace, but they're driving. And in their own way singing the Roger Miller tune, King of the Road. Next stop for them, outskirts of Baghdad, if it continues to go this way. John Roberts is rolling ever deeper inside Iraq with the U.S. Marines. And John, as we look at the map here, I don't know that you can tell us how deep you are in Iraq. We're seeing the three-pronged attack, the U.S. Marines basically in the middle there. Some of the British forces are in the west, but also some are approaching Basra, the port of Basra tonight, the British forces. But John, as you go ever deep into Iraq, has there been any contact with the Marines, any firefights, anything of that, or are you still rolling through that old graveyard of Gulf War I relics?
Dan, there has been nothing that we have seen other than just relics of, as you said, Gulf War I. There has been no contact with Iraqi troops. There has been no sighting of Iraqi personnel. It's just the 1st Marine Division, in particular the 2nd Light Armored Reconnaissance Battalion, out here in the desert almost all by itself. And you talk about getting deeper in the desert, we're getting deeper in the sand, it would seem. The road that we're on is a particularly bad one now, very, very deep with sand. But you dare not stray off the road, though, for the fear of landmines. So you have to stay in these ruts, even though some of them will test the ground clearance on a Hummer. And Dan, I was remiss when I was wheeling around our inside cameras here. I forgot to mention a critical member of our personnel. And I know that the shot isn't great because he's very backlit. Patrick Starling, our UK engineer who helped put this all together. Dan?
John Roberts, live with the U.S. Marines in Iraq, rolling toward Baghdad. Finally tonight, we turn once more to the ancient capital of Baghdad. This is a live picture of the city at this hour. Iraq's capital, a city under siege, a city in the early morning hours eerily quiet, and a city haunted by uncertainty. It is not known what has become of the country's president, Saddam Hussein. It is not known what has become of his family and the rest of his inner circle. There are reports that some of his most elite troops may be negotiating surrender. All this as U.S.-led forces roll northward from Kuwait, closer, ever closer every hour to Baghdad and the next phase of this war. Stay tuned for more of our CBS continuing coverage of America at war. For now, Dan Rather at CBS News World Headquarters in New York, wishing you a good night.
It is now 2 a.m. in the East, midnight Mountain Time. This is CBS News coverage of America at War. On up to the minute, I'm Melissa McDermott. And here's what's happening at this hour. A U.S. Marine helicopter has crashed in Kuwait. The Pentagon says there were 12 British and 4 American soldiers on board. There are no survivors. The cause of the crash is under investigation. U.S. Marines and British forces crossed into Iraq Thursday. Secretary Donald Rumsfeld characterizes the war as going very well, but world reaction to events in Iraq is mostly negative. In San Francisco, police made more than 1,000 arrests. Hundreds of thousands of protesters marched on American embassies in Athens, Paris, Moscow, and other cities. It looks like the Baghdad attack aimed at Saddam Hussein might have been on target. U.S. intelligence experts believe the Iraqi leader and perhaps 2 of his sons were inside the compound when cruise missiles and then a bunker-busting bomb struck. Now, it's not clear yet if they are dead or alive.
فداكم وفدى مبادئ أمتنا المجيدة.
Analysts are now taking a close look at a videotape purportedly showing Saddam on Iraqi television after the attack. Now, if Saddam is still alive, U.S. officials hope the surprise attack has thrown him off balance and weakened his trust in his inner circle. In other developments, the Reuters news agency is reporting the 3rd Infantry Division has advanced about 90 miles inside Iraq this morning. Reuters says the convoy has not come under fire since starting its advance